Ma'am, you now legally owe me $350 in back rent for living in my garage. That's what I told the HOA Karen who'd been terrorizing our neighborhood for 8 years. The look on her face was priceless. She went from smug and entitled to totally speechless in about 2 seconds. She thought she could park her BMW in my garage whenever she wanted. She thought she could hand out fake fines like Halloween candy. She thought she could treat me like her doormat. She didn't realize her own behavior had accidentally made her my tenant under state law. So, what's the pettiest thing an HOA has ever done to you? Drop those stories in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. By day 5, she was begging to pay rent just to get her car back. Let me show you exactly how Karen's own arrogance became her downfall. My name's Jake, and 3 months ago, I was a 34-year-old IT contractor trying to start over after a messy divorce. My grandmother had left me her little house in Pine Ridge, a modest 1960s ranch with white shutters and a detached single-car garage that smelled like old motor oil and forgotten dreams. The smell hit me every time I opened that garage door. It mixed WD-40 with decades of stored Christmas decorations and the faint echo of my grandfather's woodworking projects I'd moved in to heal. I was stretched for money, drained in my heart, and just wanted a quiet place to rebuild my life. The house was perfect except for the HOA. Enter Karen Whitmore, 52 years old. 8 years as HOA board treasurer. The kind of woman who treated a clipboard like a weapon. Drove a white BMW X5. She kept spotless. She lived in the biggest house on our block. She had a perfect bob haircut that never moved, even in strong winds. I swear her had its own engineering degree. Here's what made her dangerous. She didn't just enforce HOA rules. She used them like a weapon. And she had a pattern. Ask anyone in Pine Ridge who'd been targeted by her. Rule campaigns, and you'd notice something. Single parents, elderly folks on fixed incomes, the young Hispanic family with kids who played too loudly. Anyone who didn't fit her idea of a perfect neighborhood got the treatment. My first real run-in with her happened on day 3 after moving in. I was working from home, trying to fix a client's network issues. Then I heard the smooth purr of her BMW pulling into my driveway. No big deal, right? Maybe she was being nice and bringing a welcome basket. I walked outside and found her BMW sitting in my garage, not near it, not beside it, inside it. She stood there in designer jeans and a crisp white blouse, holding that clipboard, looking at me like I was the one who was confused. "Excuse me," I said, trying to be polite because I was new and didn't want drama. "That's my garage." She looked up from her clipboard, and I could smell her strong floral perfume from 10 feet away. "Emergency HOA meeting," she said, like that explained everything. "Your driveway was closest." The audacity took my breath away. "I need to get my tools for a client job," I said. "Could you please move your car?" Her heels clicked against the concrete as she walked past me, ignoring my request. "I'll move it when I'm good and ready," she said over her shoulder. "Maybe you should learn to be more community-minded." And just like that, she was gone, leaving her BMW in my garage like she owned the place. 6 hours. For 6 hours her car sat there while I couldn't get to my camping gear, my toolbox, or anything I'd stored inside. I had to reschedule a client appointment because I couldn't reach my equipment. When she finally came back, there was no apology and no acknowledgement. She acted like she was doing me a favor by removing her car from my property. That night, I stood in my grandmother's kitchen, looking at her old photo on the windowsill, feeling like I was already failing her memory. She'd been tough, She was the kind of woman who fought the city council to get streetlights on our block back in the 80s. What would she think of her grandson getting pushed around by an HOA queen with a superiority complex? The crunching sound of gravel under her tires when she finally pulled away kept echoing in my head. That sound, with the sweet chemical smell of her perfume still hanging in my garage, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't over. She had just declared war, and she had no idea she picked the wrong target. The next morning, I woke up to find 3 bright yellow violation notices taped to my front door like some kind of suburban scarlet letter. My coffee was still brewing when I peeled them off, and the morning dew made the ink a little smudged, but not enough to hide what she'd done. Violation number 1. Unapproved mailbox color. Apparently, my grandmother's black mailbox broke some rule about earth tone colors and neighborhood aesthetic standards. $50 fine. Violation number 2. Excessive window coverings. My bedroom blinds were supposedly not okay under community visibility rules. Another $50. Violation number 3. Improper trash bin placement. My garbage can was allegedly 4 inches too close to the street. $50 more. Each violation gave me a crisp 10-day correction period and had a handwritten note in her perfect cursive. Welcome to the neighborhood. We maintain standards here. She even added a passive-aggressive smiley face. My blood pressure jumped. Here's the thing about revenge. It's best served with a side of documentation. So instead of stomping over to her house like she probably wanted, I opened my laptop and started digging. The click-clack of my keyboard at 7 in the morning probably annoyed my neighbors, but I was on a mission. First discovery. She filed all 3 violations on the same day as the garage incident. Not suspicious at all, right? Second discovery. According to the HOA management company's portal, board members needed a majority vote before issuing citations. Her violations were filed alone. No board approval shown anywhere. But here's where it got interesting. I called the HOA management company. After 20 minutes of weird elevator jazz hold music, I got connected to a tired-sounding woman named Beth. Hi, I'm calling about some violation notices I received, I said. I wanted to confirm the filing procedures. Oh, sure, honey. What's your address? She asked. I gave her my address and heard typing in the background. Huh, that's interesting, Beth said, and I could hear the frown in her voice. These violations were filed by Karen Whitmore, but there's no record of board approval. Actually, looking at her filing history, this is a pattern. My coffee went cold as Beth explained that she had been issuing unauthorized violations for months, maybe years. The management company had been processing them automatically, assuming board approval existed. But when they started auditing files after some resident complaints, they discovered she had been acting like a one-person citation machine. So these violations are invalid? I asked. Technically, yes, Beth said. And if you want my unofficial advice, ask for itemized receipts for every HOA fine you pay. Many board members pocket that cash instead of putting it in community funds. Knowledge nugget number 1. Always demand itemized receipts for HOA fines and verify board approval with the management company. Unauthorized citations are more common than you think. But she wasn't done with me. Oh no. This was just the opening act. That afternoon, I was drafting a polite but firm email to the HOA board, demanding they dismiss her bogus violations. Then I heard that familiar BMW purr in my driveway. I looked out my window, and there she was again, pulling straight into my garage like she owned it. This time she didn't even pretend there was an emergency. She just parked, got out, and left another handwritten note under my windshield wiper. Complaints will be noted in your permanent file. Community cooperation is expected. The audacity was honestly impressive. Here I was documenting her breaking actual laws, and she responded by breaking my property rights again, while threatening me with some imaginary permanent file like we were in elementary school. But she made a crucial mistake. I had installed a security camera system the day after moving in. Nothing fancy. Just some basic wireless cameras I bought online. The footage of her first garage invasion had been useful for my records, but this second incident was pure gold. I now had proof of trespassing. I had evidence of retaliatory harassment. I had a clear pattern of her treating my private property like her personal parking spot. More importantly, I had timestamps showing she used my garage without permission, while filing bogus violations against me. That night, I sat in my grandmother's old recliner, going through my footage and documentation. The leather was worn smooth from decades of use, and it still smelled faintly of her lavender soap. I could almost hear her voice. Honey, bullies only understand one language: strength. The coffee ring stains on my laptop screen could not hide the truth staring back at me. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She didn't know I was about to flip the whole board. 2 days later, she decided to call in reinforcements. And by reinforcements, I mean her little group of HOA buddies. 3 other wives who seemed to enjoy scaring neighbors for fun. First came Linda, her second in command, driving a silver Lexus and carrying what looked like an inspection checklist. She spent 20 minutes walking around my property, taking photos of my lawn with the focus of a crime scene investigator. The grass was apparently irregularly maintained, according to some rule I'd never heard of. Then came Patricia, clipboard in hand, measuring the height of my outdoor solar lights with a real ruler. Turns out they were half an inch too tall and cast non-compliant shadows on the sidewalk. I watched this show from my kitchen window while eating a sandwich, wondering if these women had ever thought about getting real hobbies. The grand finale was Susan, who spent 15 minutes photographing my mailbox from every angle like it was evidence for an international court. Apparently, the small dent from where the previous owner had backed into it hurt neighborhood looks. By noon, I had 3 more violation notices, $50 each. Of course, her neat signature was on every single one, with another passive-aggressive note. Community standards benefit everyone. Compliance protects property values. But here's where her plan backfired badly. While her club was busy playing property inspector, I was building my own team. And it turned out I wasn't the only one who'd been targeted by the Pine Ridge Enforcement Squad. Mrs. Chun, my 78-year-old neighbor, knocked on my door that afternoon carrying a thick manila folder. Her hands shook slightly, not from age but from anger. "You want to know about Karen?" she said, settling into my grandmother's old kitchen chair. "Let me show you what she did to us." The folder held 2 years of violation notices, $50 fines for everything from too many garden gnomes to unauthorized bird feeding stations. Mrs. Chen and her husband had paid over $3,000 in bogus fines before their son threatened legal action. But Mrs. Chen wasn't alone. She introduced me to the Rodriguez family, who'd been fined again and again because their kids' toys were visible in their own backyard, and to Bill Henderson, a veteran in his 60s, who had to pay hundreds in fines because she said his service dog's water bowl was an unapproved outdoor item. The pattern was clear as day. She targeted anyone who didn't fit her perfect picture of the neighborhood. Elderly folks, families with young children, people who looked different or had less money to fight back. She was running a system of harassment, hiding behind HOA rules. That evening, I made a discovery that changed everything. While researching property law for my own situation, because honestly I was getting desperate, I found something about adverse possession laws. But more importantly, I found things about involuntary tenancy and landlord abandonment laws. The idea is pretty simple. If someone uses your property again and again while you know about it, and you don't act right away to kick them out, the law can treat them like a tenant with legal rights. Even more strange, if that person leaves personal property on your place, certain landlord-tenant rules start to apply. I spent the next 3 hours deep in a legal rabbit hole. My laptop screen glowed in the dark kitchen, while I clicked through statute after statute, checking cases and examples. The smell of reheated pizza, mixed with the faint scent of my grandmother's lavender dish soap in the sink. Then it hit me like lightning. She had been using my garage again and again. She'd stored HOA supplies and personal items there. I had security footage proving her access and use. Under state law, her repeated use of my property, plus storing her stuff there, could legally create a landlord-tenant relationship. That meant she, the HOA board treasurer and neighborhood bully, had accidentally become my tenant and didn't even know it. The irony was delicious. She tried to control my property with fake violations, while she was creating a real legal situation where I could control her under tenancy law. I leaned back in my grandmother's chair, listening to the old house settle around me, and I started to smile for the first time in weeks. She thought she was playing chess, while I was fumbling with checkers. She had no idea I was about to flip the entire board. Her next move was nuclear. 3 days after her inspection squad finished their little show, I got a knock on my door that made my blood run cold. Standing on my porch was a city building inspector with a clipboard, a hard hat, and a look that said my day was about to get worse. "Mr. Thompson, I'm here about a complaint regarding an unpermitted structure and possible zoning violations." My heart sank. "I'm sorry, what?" The inspector, a middle-aged guy named Rodriguez, checked his papers. "We got a report that you're running an illegal business from your garage, breaking residential zoning rules. Also, claims of structural changes without permits." I stood there in my coffee-stained T-shirt, trying to process what I was hearing. The morning air smelled like autumn leaves and bad news. "Business? What business?" "IT consulting," he said. "According to the person who reported it, report says you added extra electrical work and ventilation systems." The puzzle pieces clicked together. She had called the city and lied about me running a business from my garage. She was trying to get my property retagged. She had jumped from petty HOA harassment to trying to make my home unlivable. But here's the thing about being an IT guy: we're good at documentation. "Can I ask who filed the complaint?" I said, already guessing the answer. He flipped through his papers. "Karen Whitmore, HOA board member." She gave a very detailed report with photos and timestamps. Of course she did. I spent the next hour walking Rodriguez through my property. Records. It turned out my garage was built in 1962, fully permitted and listed in the city's own records. Pulled up the original construction permits on the city website while he watched. His face went from official to annoyed. "These records show the garage was legally built," he said, comparing his papers to my screen. "And I don't see any sign of commercial activity." Then I showed him something that made his jaw tighten. Her complaint had multiple false statements, not just mistakes, but things that looked made up on purpose. She had claimed I added electrical outlets for big industrial equipment, when those outlets were original from 1962. She reported commercial-grade ventilation systems that were actually just the standard garage door opener my grandpa installed in the 80s. Filing false reports with the city is serious, he said, snapping his folder shut. This complaint has several things that look deliberately wrong. But she wasn't done. While he was finishing his inspection, guess whose white BMW came purring into my driveway? She showed up, probably hoping to see my garage get condemned. Instead, she walked into a scene where a city inspector was noting her false statements. "Mrs. Whitmore," he called out as she approached. "I need to ask you about the report you filed." The color drained from her face faster than water down a drain. "Oh, well, I was just concerned about safety and property values." "Your report says unauthorized electrical work," he said. "But city records show all electrical was done during original construction. You also reported commercial ventilation that doesn't exist. Can you explain these differences?" She started stammering about trying to help and keeping standards, but he wasn't buying it. He explained that false reports waste city time and can lead to fines. Watching her squirm under real authority was like watching a vampire meet sunlight. Her confidence disappeared the moment she faced someone with actual power who wasn't scared of her. Clipboard. But this gave me something even better than satisfaction. It gave me the last piece of my legal puzzle. That night, I called my buddy Rick, a lawyer who owed me a favor after I fixed his office network during a ransomware mess. I explained her growing harassment, her repeated use of my garage, and her attempts to hurt my property. "What you're describing sounds like she might have accidentally created a landlord-tenant relationship," he said. "How's that work?" "She's been using your garage again and again," he said. "She stored her stuff there. She treated it like her own space. If you can show consistent use over time, there's legal precedent for involuntary tenancy." My heart started racing. What would that mean? It means she could legally be your tenant. You could demand back rent, set lease terms, or start eviction. Document everything, because this could get very interesting. I hung up and looked around my grandmother's kitchen, feeling her fighting spirit in me. The scent of her old lavender soap still lingered lightly, mixing with the smell of cold pizza on the counter. She thought she could crush me with lies and fear. She had no idea. She'd just handed me the keys to her own downfall. The next morning, I sat in Rick's small law office that smelled like old leather and fresh coffee, watching him flip through printouts of my camera footage and paperwork. His desk was covered with law books and empty energy drink cans. "This is actually incredible," he said, pushing up his glasses. "Her repeated use of your garage meets the criteria for involuntary tenancy under state law." He pulled out a thick legal manual and read. "Look at this. When someone uses private property, again and again with the owner's knowledge, stores personal things there, and shows a pattern of regular access, the law may recognize an implied landlord-tenant relationship." My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying she has been your unauthorized tenant for 6 weeks and she doesn't even know it." He grinned like a shark. "Even better, she's been storing HOA supplies in your garage. Under landlord-tenant law, that's abandoned property if she leaves it without paying rent." The legal meaning hit me hard. "So, what does that mean?" He started counting on his fingers. "First, you can demand back rent for her use of the space. Fair market rate for garage storage is about $150 a month. She's been using your garage for 6 weeks. That's about $225 in back rent. But wait, there's more. Late fees, inconvenience, and utility costs bring her total to around $350. And here's the best part. As her landlord, you have legal rights to secure the property if rent isn't paid." My head spun. "Secure the property? You?" can legally lock the garage with her stuff inside until she pays what she owes. It's called a landlord's lien. And if she doesn't pay within the notice period required by law, you can get rid of the abandoned property. The irony was perfect. She had been using my garage, like she owned it and treating me like I had no power. But her behavior had accidentally made her my tenant with real legal duties. And here's another beautiful part, he said. Look at your camera timestamps. She's been entering your garage using her own key. I blinked. Her own key? She had to get that key somewhere, he said. Either she copied it without permission, or someone gave her access. Either way, it proves she treated your garage like her personal storage unit. He pulled out a legal form and started writing. We're going to serve her with a formal notice of tenancy and rent demand. Certified mail, all by the book. She have 7 days too. Respond after getting the notice. The smell of coffee mixed with musty law books as he explained the timeline. She can pay the back rent and create a formal lease. She can fight the tenancy claim in court, or she can face eviction. And if she ignores it, then we file for eviction and her BMW becomes collateral for unpaid rent. His grin got wider. You caught her in a perfect legal trap. I sat there in silence, realizing I'd been playing chess the whole time. Her harassment, her garage use, her storing items, it all led to this moment where her actions gave me legal power over her knowledge. Nugget number 2. Property law is complex, but repeated use of someone's space with storage of personal items can create involuntary tenancy that gives landlords strong rights. He handed me the completed notice. Welcome to being her landlord, he said. Something tells me she won't take this well. Over the next 3 days, I built what I called my Justice League. A small team of neighbors who'd been waiting years for someone to stand up to her rule. First recruit, Mrs. Chun, who showed up with a manila folder thick enough to stop a bullet, and eyes that sparkled with the kind of focused revenge only a 78-year-old grandmother can bring. Sweetie, she said, settling into my kitchen. I've been keeping records for 2 years. She targeted my rose garden, my bird feeders, even my grandson's bicycle. It's time to use this. Her documentation was amazing. Photos, timestamps, copies of every fake violation. She had even recorded some of the aggressive confrontations. On her phone. She was basically a one-person surveillance team hiding in plain sight. Next came the Rodriguez family. Maria and Carlos, with their 8-year-old twins, who'd been fined again and again for having the nerve to own toys. Carlos worked in construction and knew property law better than most lawyers. Man, what you're doing is smart, he said, reviewing the legal plan. She's been acting like she owns everyone's property. Time she learned about real ownership rights. Maria pulled out her own folder. She fined us $200 last month because Eleanor's chalk art was defacing the sidewalk. It was hopscotch. Then there was Bill Henderson, the 63-year-old veteran whose service dog had been called an unapproved outdoor fixture by her twisted reading of the rules. Bill brought experience dealing with red tape and a calm that could not be shaken. Son, he said, looking over the paperwork. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You're using her own tools against her. My secret weapon was Rick's legal brain. He spent hours explaining landlord-tenant law, telling us our rights and her duties in simple words. Here's the great thing about involuntary tenancy, he told our group in my living room. It's not some weird loophole. It's real law meant to protect property owners from this exact thing. He pulled out a whiteboard and drew simple steps. Step 1, serve the notice by certified mail. Step 2, wait for her response. Step 3, document everything she does after. The technical setup was where my IT skills helped. I upgraded my camera system, added audio recording, and set up automatic cloud backups. Every interaction with her would be recorded in clear video and audio. Knowledge nugget number 3. In property fights, full documentation wins. Courts love timestamps, video proof, and certified mail records. Mrs. Chen said we should coordinate our response. If she hits back at you, she might go after all of us. We need to be ready. So we created a neighborhood communication network. Group texts, shared photo folders, coordinated documentation. If she tried to target any of us, the others would start recording right away. Carlos had a smart idea too. Research fair market rental rates. If this goes to court, you want solid numbers. I know 3 storage places we can ask for quotes. We found that garage storage in our area rented for between $140 and $160 per month. Her 6 weeks of use, plus late fees and utility costs, easily matched the $350 demand. Rick calculated. Bill suggested we look at her own property for possible violations. Know your enemy, he said. If she wants to play by HOA rules, let's see if she follows them herself. That search was eye-opening. Her own property had at least 4 violations. She never cited herself for an unapproved garden shed, outdoor lighting that was too tall, mailbox that didn't match the approved colors. The mental prep was just as important. Rick taught me to stay calm during any fight, document everything, and never lose my cool, no matter what she did. She will escalate after she gets this notice, he warned. Expect the worst behavior you've ever seen from her. But that's actually good. The more wild she acts, the stronger your case. Mrs. Chen patted my hand with the calm of someone who had raised 6 kids. Sweetie, bullies like her get away with it so long they forget there are consequences. Time to remind her. As our planning ended, I looked around my grandmother's living room at this unlikely team. Late afternoon sunlight came through the windows, showing dust dancing in the air and determined faces. She had spent years dividing and controlling this neighborhood through fear. She was about to learn what happens when her targets join together and fight back with real legal tools. The certified mail notice was delivered on her Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m. I know this because her reaction was so loud that 3 neighbors texted me the exact time she started screaming in her driveway. The notice was simple and strong. Official letterhead, clear legal words, and a straight message. Notice of landlord-tenant relationship and demand for rent. Rick wrote it perfectly, explaining that she owed me $350 for her unauthorized garage use. Her first response came exactly 43 minutes after delivery. I was working when I heard her BMW screech into my driveway with the fury of someone whose worldview just broke. The pounding on my door sounded like someone trying to break it down. I calmly turned on my security cameras, made sure my phone was recording, and opened the door. Her face was twisted in a shade of red I didn't know people could term. This is harassment, she yelled, waving the notice like it was on fire. This is frivolous. This is insane. Good morning, I said calmly. I see you got the notice. You have 7 days to respond under state law. You can't just declare me your tenant. That's not how this works. I pulled out my phone and showed her the security footage of her using my garage again and again. Actually, that's how involuntary tenancy law works, I said. You used my property again and again. You stored your belongings there. You showed a clear pattern of access. Watching her entitled confidence crumble was like watching a controlled building fall down. She'd bullied people who didn't know their rights for so long that she never met someone who knew the law. I was just It was emergency parking, she stammered. 23 separate times over 6 weeks, I replied, checking my notes. That's not emergency parking. That's regular use of private property without permission. Her voice went so high it probably scared neighborhood dogs. Sue you. I'll have you arrested. I'll get you kicked out. Feel free to call the police, I said, pointing at my cameras. I'm sure they'll want to see the footage of your repeated trespassing. That's when she made her first critical error. Instead of leaving to get a lawyer, she escalated the fight. Right there in front of my cameras, with perfect audio, she made threats that would look awful in court. You have no idea who you're messing with, she snarled. I have connections. I'll make your life hell. I'll have city inspectors here every week. I just smiled and held up my phone. All being recorded, I said. But please continue. The moment she realized she was being recorded hit her like a slap. For a second, her mask dropped completely, and I saw the real person. Not the confident HOA enforcer, but a small bully who'd never been challenged. But she wasn't done. Over the next 3 days, she went scorched earth. She filed city complaints about my illegal parking structure. She reported my security cameras as privacy violations. She even called the fire department, saying my garage was a fire hazard. Each complaint was more ridiculous than the last. The city inspector, who had already cleared my garage, sent back a form letter basically saying, "Stop wasting our time." The fire department found nothing wrong, except her own storage violations. But here's where her desperation really showed. She started targeting my allies. Mrs. Chun got 2 new violation notices for too many garden ornaments. The Rodriguez family got cited for unauthorized children's equipment in their backyard. Bill Henderson was threatened with fines for his service dog's water bowl. The best part was, we were ready. Our network lit up every time she moved. Photos, timestamps, witnesses. We documented everything with perfect detail. Carlos texted me a photo of her measuring his kid's playground with a ruler at 6 in the morning. Mrs. Chen sent video of her yelling at rose bushes like they offended her. Bill calmly recorded her arguing with his service dog about water rules. But her biggest mistake was underestimating how dumb the whole neighborhood was. Word of our plan spread fast. Other residents came forward with their own horror stories, and proof. By Thursday, she had turned herself from the enforcer into the neighborhood outcast. Her attempts to scare us backfired, creating a long trail of harassment that any lawyer would love. The smell of autumn leaves filled the air. As I watched her support crumble, even her usual allies started backing away. From her growingly wild behavior, she had 5 days left to respond to my notice. And instead of getting a lawyer, she was digging herself into a deeper hole with each desperate move. She was about to learn that when you start a war with someone who knows the law, you better be able to win. I blinked slowly, trying to process the audacity. She had called state housing authorities and filed false reports saying I ran an illegal rental operation. I'm sorry, I said, pulling out my phone to record. But this is a single-family house. I live here alone. Her face lit up with smug joy. Then explain why you've been demanding rent from residents of this community. There it was. Her trap. She thought she was smart, using my legal notice against me. In her mind, if I demanded rent from her, I must be running an illegal rental business. The housing inspector looked confused. Sir, do you rent out parts of your property? No, I said calmly. But I do have an involuntary tenant who has been using my garage without permission for 6 weeks. Her smug smile shook. That's not. You can't just actually, I said to the inspector. Understate. Landlord-tenant law. Repeated unauthorized use of private property can create a tenancy. I showed the inspector my proof. Security footage of her using my garage. Again and again. TIMESTAMPS. Photos of her personal items stored in my garage. The legal notice Rip had prepared. This woman has been trespassing repeatedly, I explained. My research showed her pattern of use made her my involuntary tenant under state law. The inspector studied my proof with growing interest. Ma'am, she said, turning to her. Did you file a false report about illegal boarding house operations? Her face went through several colors before landing on a sickly green. I was just community safety. He's harassing residents. Ma'am, filing false reports with state agencies is serious, the inspector said firmly. This looks like a private property dispute, not a housing code issue. The woman with the camera, probably a private investigator she hired, quietly backed toward their car. Even she could see this was going bad. But here's where the HOA bully made her biggest mistake. Instead of stopping, she doubled down with a screaming meltdown that was epic even for her. This is all lies, she shouted. He's tricking you. I'm a respected member of this community. I've been on the HOA board for 8 years. The inspector stepped back as her voice reached glass-breaking levels. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. I will not calm down. This man is destroying our neighborhood. He's a troublemaker. He doesn't belong here. And there was the mask off. Her true feelings about who belonged were out in the open for everyone to hear. The inspector's face shifted from polite to uncomfortable. Mrs. Chun chose that perfect moment to walk over with a plate of cookies and a manila folder. Officer, she said sweetly, I have 2 years of records showing this woman's harassment of elderly residents. Behind her came Carlos with his folder, and Bill with his service dog and a stack of fake violations. Within minutes, she was surrounded by neighbors with proof of her abuse. The inspector looked around at this sudden wall of evidence, then back at the HOA bully, who was still ranting about property values. Ma'am, the inspector said, I think you need to leave now. As her hired helpers hurried to their cars, she made one last threat that sealed her fate. You haven't heard the last of this. I'll have you all evicted. I'll call immigration. The inspector held up her hand. Ma'am, stop talking. You're making this much worse for yourself. She finally seemed to realize she was standing in a hole she dug, surrounded by witnesses and cameras, after threatening residents based on what she thought their immigration status was. The autumn air mixed with the sharp smell of her burning bridges as I watched her storm back to her BMW. She had less than 48 hours left to respond to my legal notice. And instead of hiring a lawyer, she had just created enough evidence to bury herself in court. Sunday evening came with the weight of a judge's gavel. She had exactly 12 hours left to respond to my legal notice. Instead of paying or talking, she called an emergency HOA board meeting to deal with the crisis hurting our community. The community center was packed, like a sold-out concert. More than 40 residents filled every chair, with more standing along the walls. I spotted a reporter from the local newspaper in the back, camera ready. Word had spread about her meltdown with the housing inspector, and half the neighborhood wanted to see the finale. She sat at the head table, with the 3 remaining board members, looking like a general before a last stand. Her perfect hair showed stress cracks, and her usual confident smile was now a tight, worried line. This emergency meeting, she announced, voice echoing with forced power, is to address the disruptive and litigious behavior threatening our community. She waved a hand toward me. Jake Thompson has been harassing board members, filing frivolous legal claims and trying to extort money from long-time residents with intimidation. A low murmur ran through the crowd. She was trying to spin this as a community versus outsider story. But she didn't know about our documentation network. I stood up slowly, with Rick beside me holding a briefcase full of evidence. May I respond to these accusations? This is a closed board meeting, she snapped. Residents may watch but not speak unless invited. Actually, said board member Patricia Martinez, clearly tired of her power trips, any resident has the right to address the board during emergency meetings. It's in our bylaws. Her face turned red, but she couldn't argue with her own rules. Fine, but keep it brief. I walked to the front, feeling every eye on me. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, mixing with the nervous energy of neighbors who had waited years for this. Thank you. I'd like to start by playing audio from Friday's incident with the state housing inspector. The room went silent as her voice filled the speakers. I will not calm down. This man is destroying our neighborhood. He's a troublemaker. He doesn't belong here. Then came the immigration threats, crystal clear in high-quality audio. The room winced as they heard their HOA treasurer threaten residents based on her guesses about immigration, in front of a government official. That's taken out of context. She yelled, jumping to her feet. I was defending our community. From what? I asked calmly. From me legally demanding rent for your unauthorized use of my garage. I pulled out Rick's legal paperwork and read. She used my garage without permission on 23 documented times over 6 weeks. She stored personal items and HOA supplies on my property. Under state landlord-tenant law, this creates an involuntary tenancy. The crowd leaned in. Mrs. Chun stood up in the back, holding her manila folder like a tool. May I add something? She called sweetly. This isn't the time. The HOA bully snapped, looking panicked. Let her speak, said board member David Kim, who seemed to decide she had dug her own grave deep enough. Mrs. Chun walked to the front with the calm of someone who had spoken at city meetings for decades. I have 2 years of proof showing her harassment of elderly residents, families with children, and anyone she decided didn't belong here. She opened her folder and began reading violation notices. Too many garden gnomes. Unauthorized bird feeding stations. Improper cultural decorations during holidays. The crowd started buzzing. People whispered and pointed, recognizing their own experiences in Mrs. Chun's words. Carlos stood up next. She fined us $200 because my daughter drew hopscotch squares with chalk. Bill's voice carried from the back. She tried to make me pay $50 because my service dog's water bowl was an unapproved outdoor fixture. One by one, neighbors stood up and shared their stories. The floodgates opened and 8 years of anger and frustration poured out. She tried to take back control. This is character assassination. I've served this community for 8 years. That's when the reporter spoke. Mrs. Whitmore, can you comment on the false reports you filed with city and state agencies? A room exploded. Cameras flashed. Neighbors shouted questions. She looked around, realizing she was surrounded by witnesses and proof. Board member Martinez called for order. Given what we've heard tonight, I move to suspend Karen Whitmore from the HOA board immediately, pending a full investigation. Seconded, said Kim at once. All in favor? Martinez asked. 3 hands went up fast. Her hand stayed down. She stood there a moment, surrounded by the ruins of her little kingdom, looking like a ruler who just realized the revolution had won. This isn't over, she said quietly. But her voice had no power now, only the empty sound of someone who lost everything. As she gathered her things and walked to the exit, Rick leaned over and gave the perfect last line. You have until midnight to pay the $350 in back rent, or we file eviction first thing Monday. The sound of her heels clicking on the linoleum echoed through the silent room as the 8 Year rain ended. At 11:47 p.m. that Sunday night, exactly 13 minutes before my legal deadline. I heard the familiar purr of her BMW pulling into my driveway one last time. But this wasn't the same entitled person who first invaded my garage. This was someone broken, clutching an envelope like it held her whole life. Through my security cameras, I watched her walk slowly to my door. Her perfect posture finally showed the weight of her fall. The knock was soft, almost sorry. When I opened the door, she stood there with red-rimmed eyes and an envelope in her shaking hand. "Money," she said quietly, not looking at me. $350 cash. I opened the envelope and counted. Every dollar was there. "Thank you," I said. "This settles your back rent." She nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. For a moment, I thought she might say sorry or admit the harm she caused. Instead, she said, "You won't be seeing me anymore. I'm moving to Florida next month." And just like that, she disappeared into the night, leaving Pine Ridge for good. The quick aftermath was like watching a neighborhood wake up from a bad dream. Within 48 hours of her resignation, the HOA board called an emergency audit of all fines collected over the past 2 years. They found she had pocketed over $4,000 in unauthorized citations money that belonged to the community fund. The management company refunded every bogus fine. She issued. Mrs. Chen got back her $3,000. The Rodriguez family got their $200 back. Bill was refunded for his service dog violations. Even I got back the $150 she tried to squeeze from me with fake notices. But the real change was in the community. With her gone, neighbors started talking again. Kids played in their yards without fear of violation slips. Mrs. Chen's garden gnomes returned to their spots like tiny guards celebrating victory. A new HOA board, led by Patricia Martinez, created what they called the Karen Protocols. Transparency rules, required board votes for all citations, community ombudsman to stop future abuse. They even put a suggestion box in the community center, so people could report harassment without fear. 3 weeks after her exit, something wonderful happened. I was working in my garage, finally and fully mine, when Mrs. Chen knocked. "Sweetie," she said, holding a plate of cookies that smelled amazing. "We're planning a block party for next Saturday. Will you help?" That block party became the first annual Pine Ridge Community Festival. 50 families showed up. Carlos brought his famous barbacoa. Bill's service dog got belly rubs from a dozen kids. Even the local reporter came back to write a follow-up about healing. Best of all, we raised enough money to install a playground where her aesthetic standards once banned children's laughter. The kids love it, and their happy screams echo through the neighborhood every afternoon, like a song of freedom. 6 months later, I got a call from a lawyer in Tampa. Apparently, she tried her old tricks in her new Florida community, targeting an elderly Cuban family with fake violations. But this time, her targets were ready. They found my story online and used my legal plan to turn the tables. Involuntary tenancy. The lawyer chuckled on the phone. Brilliant. She's been their tenant for 2 months and doesn't even know it. Some things never changed. As for me, I started a small consulting business helping other communities deal with HOA abuse. Turns out there are Karens everywhere, and most people don't know their rights. My website, fightyouhoa.com, gets thousands of visits from homeowners looking for hope. Knowledge. Nugget number 4. Community bullies rely on isolation and ignorance. But when neighbors unite and learn their legal rights, even the strongest bully can be defeated. Every morning, I still drink my coffee in my grandmother's kitchen And look at her photo on the WINDOWSILL. I'm not failing her memory. I'm honoring it. She'd be proud that her grandson learned to fight City Hall, or in this case, HOA hell. The garage still smells like motor oil and forgotten dreams, but now it also carries the sweet scent of victory. Her BMW may be gone, but the legal lesson remains. Park in someone's garage long enough, and you might become their tenant. So, what's the pettiest thing an HOA has ever done to you? Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and sometimes they become case studies for my consulting work. And hey, if you liked watching her get her payback through real law, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Next week, I'm telling you about the Walmart manager who tried to make company policy disappear. A Karen who wanted to return a turkey skeleton on Black Friday. Trust me, you won't want to miss that.